I'm going to spend some time helping you get started on your first chapter assignment. The first chapter assignment has two questions. The first question is, Misha Pauly stood at the front of his classroom and smiled broadly as his students filed in for their first meeting. He was excited about his first day. He had his notes, motivation plan, and management system ready. He was confident that his double major in history and English would make him a stellar teacher. He was especially lucky in that he had obtained an emergency certificate and hadn't been forced to waste all that time in teacher education classes. If Misha's experience is consistent with patterns identified by research, is Misha likely to be relatively successful or relatively unsuccessful in his first year of teaching? Explain. And I'm expecting you to get that answer basically from the book and from your own experience. What would the book say about his situation? And make sure you cite it APA style in the text. There are not a bunch of quotes. You can have maybe a one-line quote, maybe a two-line quote, but no more than that. I do not want to have a whole paragraph of quotes. I want to see mostly what you're writing. I don't want to see what you're copying from somewhere else. And if you are using quotations, that will not count in the minimum of 350 words. Make sure there are 3 references. One of them can be the textbook. The syllabus has the textbook formatted correctly in APA style. And make sure you look at the video that I made about APA in text citation in the text that you're writing and in your reference list, which will be at the end. Make sure that every reference is also cited in the text. Everything cited in the text is in the reference. Avoid websites as much as possible. Now you go through the TAMIU database of journal articles and books and so forth. That'll be fine, but generally avoid the internet. Just doing a search on something and copying something from there or getting it from a web page. That'll be considered a weak reference for the most part. If you use one of those kinds of references, make sure you have another one that is academic so that you will have 4 references perhaps, and one of them will be that web page. That'll be fine as long as you have 4 references. 3 of your references must be academic. 1 can be the textbook. Now this is your first assignment. You're going to post that first. You will not see what your classmates have written. You're going to have to write yours first, and once you have submitted yours, if anyone else has done their assignment, then you will see theirs. And then you will be able to respond to one of your peers. You have to respond to one of your peers as in the instructions. The second question is also from Chapter 1, but that is due later. It's not due the same day. Okay, Chapter 2 discussion question. And each of these discussion questions must be submitted to 2 places. You're going to have a text file or a Word file or something like that. And you're going to copy and paste it to the discussion forum. And you're going to also upload it or submit it to Turnitin. And when you submit it to Turnitin, make sure that you actually submit. There are several steps and you click several buttons. Make sure you actually submit it and make sure that you get the receipt that it was submitted to Turnitin. Now remember, everything has to be done before midnight on the day designated in the syllabus. And make sure you have the minimum of 350 words and 3 references, all academic. And the next day, of course, for each of these, you respond to a peer. And you can do it the very same day just to get it over with. Now, the second question, which is due not on the same day as the first question, of the different roles that teachers perform, manager, motivator, instructor, and evaluator, which is most important to your grade level or content area? Least important? How does the context of your teaching situation, for example, urban versus rural or suburban, influence your answer? Now, I don't want you answering just part of it, and I don't want you to spend 300 words on one little part of the question and then 1 sentence on the other half of the question. I want to see equal effort and equal word count, basically. Not exactly equal, but I want to see a significant response to each sub-question within there. In the 300 words or so, it can be longer, no problem. And a longer answer doesn't always mean it's going to be a better answer, especially if a lot of it is wrong or off topic. I want to be it on topic. Make sure you're focusing in on what the question is asking. If you're ignoring what's asking and you're just talking about whatever, that won't help. So make sure that when you work on this, that you work on both of these and all those questions that are with all those sub questions. And so you do that for the chapter 1 discussion question 1 for the first assignment, and then the second assignment is the chapter 1 discussion question 2. Now these are both from chapter 1, so I'm doing both of these together, and these are due on in the same week. Now let's go take a look at the textbook. And there's an e-text that I was giving access to, and I also got the regular text like you have in the mail. And so I'll be reading that probably along with you. I'll try to stay a little bit ahead, and I'll be making these recordings as I go along. Now this first chapter is really good. I wish I had a book like this, or I had time to read a book like this when I first started teaching. Now my teaching history, I was not a very good teacher, and my teaching preparation was not very good. I think a lot of my problems were because I was not in a traditional program, and even though they did not even have a traditional program in California, I did not have the proper courses or the proper supervision in order to become a better teacher when I started. I was doing it sort of by the seat of my pants and my own resources, and with my personality, I wasn't one to go for help. And so I struggled a lot, and my students probably struggled a bit as well in different areas. I think with a little more time, I would have become a good teacher, and I kept getting better year after year, and I learned more and more. But when I did my graduate school, and I could reflect on what I did and how I should teach, and when I've been teaching undergraduates and graduate students at TAMU, and as I've read and I've researched and I've observed the excellent teachers and the teachers who are not so good, then I've come to believe that the better the preparation, the better the teacher will be. And there are some personality traits that will make you a better teacher as well. And if you do not have the proper personality, let's not call it the proper personality. If you do not have a personality that makes you a natural as a teacher, you can compensate for that in other ways. Okay, let's look at the textbook, and there are a lot of different things. Now, starting out on page 5, it talks about the preeminence of teachers and how important teachers are. And they also had a list of different ideas about the 12 items inside the statement is true or false. And there are a lot of misperceptions about teaching. And so read those over. You'll find those interesting, and you'll find out why you were wrong in these areas and why you are right. And this has been proven through research, and you can look at that research along the way. Now, they talk about different kinds of knowledge, professional knowledge, the knowledge of content, pedagogical content knowledge, general pedagogical knowledge, and knowledge of learners and learning. And when you take your certification test, you're going to take the one called the PPR exam, which is more about the pedagogy. And they will take examples from different content areas, different grade levels, and you're supposed to know about your pedagogy. Now, in your content area, suppose it is, let's say, high school or high school history. They will want to know, they'll ask you some questions that are pure pedagogy. You don't need to know any history at all. I could answer those questions because it's only pedagogy and what is good pedagogy. Then you'll have questions that are pure knowledge of the content area on history. And I would probably have trouble with some of those. I would do okay, but I am certified in social studies, and history is one part of social studies. And so I'm certified high school social studies in Texas. I'm certified middle school social studies in Texas, and I am certified all level elementary. So when you're taking that test, you need to know history. Now, the idea of pedagogical content knowledge, what is the best way to teach history? It's probably not lecture. And as you go through here and you understand the course, you're going to find that lecture is the least effective way of teaching. It might be the most efficient for the teacher and leaving all the responsibility on the students to learn like they often do in college. But you're going to find that with the average kids and average student population, that will not be the most effective, and they will not allow you to fail all of your students. And are they going to come out smarter and not more knowledgeable? And in your content area of history, or will they not? And so they want to know if you know how to best teach history to your students. They'll ask you questions about that. Then there's also knowledge of learners and learning. And this has a lot to do with educational psychology, and we'll go over this over and over again. What do we know about learners and about learning? What is the best way to learn? What are some of the options you have in presenting materials and giving tasks to students and assessing students to make sure that they learn? And so those are going to be themes throughout the course. There are a lot of good sections in this textbook, and when you go through their general pedagogical knowledge, it's going to talk about instructional strategies, classroom management, knowledge of learners, knowledge of learning. They give you some good ideas here. Read those, understand those. If you're teaching now, these will give you information that will be useful for you immediately. If you're not teaching yet, try to store that and try to master these things so that you'll be ready with this knowledge when you do start teaching. Developmentally appropriate practice. This is a good little summary here, very short, of characteristics of the elementary child, the middle school child, and the high school child, adolescent. And then they talk about reflective practice, in that you are always evaluating how well did I do, how can I do better, where do I find resources on how to improve. And the role of research in acquiring professional knowledge. And read this, and it's going to talk about research, the different kinds of research, and the value of research. And of course, those who write textbooks and those who teach have to be involved in research. We have to evaluate the research, and we're always trying to improve. And you are actually going to be doing some research as graduate students. And there's a class that I teach sometimes, action research, where you're going to do action research in one or two or more of your graduate classes. So read about that. Okay, now they talk about some of the challenges in today's classrooms, and these are important. It's different now than it was when I first started teaching, and that would have been like 40 years ago that I first taught. And I taught very little. I was a teacher's aide when I was doing my student teaching in Huntington Beach, California. And then we went to South America for the next 17 years, and a few years after that working with the same organization. And I did not teach school again until more than 20 years after I actually did my student teaching. And things had changed a little bit, but they weren't as they are now. Now it's been almost 20 years since that time that I've been teaching here at TAMU, and education has changed a lot. The standards and accountability, which pretty much started in Texas and then has gone all over the country. I was kind of relieved that in California, when I was teaching between the few years between TAMU and living in Peru, that I was so glad that we weren't doing all the testing in California like they were in Texas. They were testing, but it was diagnostic to help the students instead of to evaluate the teacher in the school and so forth. And I like it better when you're actually trying to help individual students through testing and not judging the teacher or the school or the district with that. Now there's pros and cons to this, but they're just going to talk about it here and some of the issues. And so standards and accountability, read that. That's very current, very popular right now. It's a theme that is very important for teachers. And then we have the Common Core State Standards Initiative. And it was fine probably when it came from the states, but then when the federal government gets involved, then there are a lot of states who, even though they liked it as it started out. Later on, the politicians got involved, and they're not always in agreement if a central authority is telling you you must do it this way. Now, if they have common standards, and these are a model for others to build off of, that's fine for several states, but they normally don't want the government to tell them what the central government tell them what to do. This is the American way, is that we do not have central government in education. It's a states' rights issue. It always has been. It's controlled by the local school board, and it's a education and has always been responsibility of the individual states, not of the federal government, which is quite different than in other countries. And so that's why there are several controversies, and even in the state, there are differences in different parts of the state and in different school districts. So read that. That's interesting. That's a very contemporary issue. And then teachers' licensure and evaluation. The standards for licensure have gone up, but when they relax them when there's a shortage of teachers in a particular field, and they increase them when there's a surplus of qualified teachers. And then also they're starting to evaluate them not only on how they perform in the classroom as far as they're doing everything right, but they're also being evaluated on the success of their students. And so if they have low performing students, they're not going to get as good of an evaluation as a teacher that has high performing students unless you use value added modeling. And in value added modeling, if you have low performing students but you bring them up in their abilities, then you're going to be judged as doing well. So read that, especially if you plan on working with a low performing population, and look at the advantage of a value added modeling. And they talk about trends, which are in learner diversity, technology. Of course, here's an online course that we're doing right now. We're trying to improve these all the time. A lot of interesting things in the classroom. And I'm just hoping that you're going to find the time to really read the textbook and learn as much as you can from it. Do your best on these assignments, and they will actually change the way you teach and your knowledge, and you're going to become more professional and an educational leader. This is my hope for you. So if you have any questions, please give me a call.